This episode is brought to you by Airbus, U.S. Space and Defense. Marine Corps Expeditionary Advanced Base operations require logistical support when and where Marines need it. The Airbus UH-72 Unmanned Logistics Connector provides proven performance and reliability alongside next-generation autonomous capability. As the Marine Corps revolutionizes warfare, the UH-72 Unmanned Logistics Connector evolves to support it. Visit AirbusUS.com to learn more. That's AirbusUS.com. We would like to thank Airbus, U.S. Space and Defense for sponsoring this episode.
Hello, listeners. We are here live on the floor of Day 2 Modern Day Marine, and we're bringing back another segment of World of Wargaming. And today we have Tim Barrick, who is leading the Commandant's Cup, the big wargaming tournament occurring live at Modern Day Marine 2024. Tim, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Will.
All right, so first, give us the updates. How is it going so far?
Well, I literally just walked down here from us finishing essentially the semifinals. We had 3 rounds. We have 3 teams competing, 12 individuals total. And the teams are from Marine Corps Tactics and Operations Group, the Expeditionary Warfare School, and Advanced Infantry Training Battalion East. They competed in a qualifier tournament to get here, and they've been competing over the last 2 days here on the floor across 3 events. And we just finished up the semifinal round to determine the top 2 teams that are advancing to the finals tomorrow morning. And it's been a good competition so far. The 3 events that they've competed in have been 2 computer games and 1 board game. The 2 computer games are Flashpoint Campaigns, which is a commercial computer game, primarily battalion level tactics. And then we have a Company Commander modern game with obviously company tactics. And then the tabletop game is a small joint task force level plan that they have to implement and make decisions across a joint task force.
Well, last time we spoke, you would not tell me about the board game, but let it out. Like, describe it.
Oh, is this the mystery game?
This was the mystery
This
game.
is the secret, the big, yeah.
Yeah, so a little background on this before I do the reveal. So the intent of this tournament was to test the competitors across different skill sets from a tactic standpoint, right? And you guys probably played enough games to know that certain individuals can just play one game and be very proficient at that, and they have kind of the inside scoop on perhaps how to gain advantage in that game that might be a particular game-ism or game mechanic, right? That they're wired. That doesn't necessarily make them the best tactician. So what I wanted to do is make sure that in this Commandant's Cup competition, you had to compete across multiple events so that if you stood out and won, you clearly demonstrated some tactical proficiency across all 3 of those.
It's like you just hacked the system.
That's right.
Sort of thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that meant I wanted to have a combination of computer and board game. And so this board game, for a tournament, knowing that it was just going to be able to be one match that you would be able to play, and we wouldn't have the time in the tournament to allow them to play both sides, then I wanted to get a chess-like board game where it was fair, right? Because you didn't want to put somebody in a position of, hey, you're just in the defense, you're in the offense, and then there might be a scenario advantage there or a decision advantage. I wanted to make it an even playing field. So historically, there's a game in the commercial board game hobby industry that is regarded as the game that really kicked off the war game industry in the 20th century. And that was a game called Tactics that was made in 1954 by Charles S. Roberts.
Okay.
And Charles S. Roberts, today in the hobby commercial war game industry, there's awards given out each year. They're called the Charles S. Roberts Awards. And he's recognized as kind of kicking off that whole genre of games, and Tactics was the first one in that series. And then he went on to basically found Avalon Hill Game Company.
Okay.
That really drove a lot of the gaming industry, the hobby gaming industry in the 70s and 80s. A lot of that was Avalon Hill, Squad Leader, Wooden Ships and Iron Men. There's a bunch of games that Avalon Hill really set the industry standard in that time period. And that game I grew up playing, Tactics 2, which was a follow-on edition of Tactics. What's unique about this game is the sides are exactly mirror-imaged forces. Tactics 2, the terrain was a little bit different on each side of the game board, So I decided that kind of inspired me to create something like this for a modern era game that the players would be challenged with the contemporary all-domain warfare, special forces, naval warfighting, air fighting, ground warfighting, but mirror image forces, and on a mirror image game board from a terrain standpoint, so that terrain is equal, forces are equal, and it comes down to the tactical decision making and the roll of the die. Chance definitely comes into play to this as well, but it's the decision making of, hey, what actions are you going to do? Are you, in chess, you're going to move your knight, out, you're moving your pawn out. What's that opening move that you do? And so ended up making this game basically inspired and modeled off of this Tactics 2 from Charles S. Roberts, and then calling it Joint Tactics Arena is the title of this, and it's card play decisions where you're deciding, do I want to do a fighter action with my fighter air wing, and there's 4 fighter squadrons in the game that you can employ on each side. Do you want to do a naval action? You have six naval vessels, one of those being a submarine. You have 5 brigades. One of those is airborne, one is marine, one's motorized infantry, one's mechanized, and one's tank heavy brigade. So they're all different brigades. You have those 5 brigades, and what do you want to do? What's your opening move? You're going to move your ground forces? You're going to do a soft action? You're going to do an air action? You're going to do a missile strike because you've got short-range ballistic missiles. You have a cruise missile unit. What's that first action? So the players have 8 action points in that first round, and they pick the cards to do that, and then they determine the sequence of their actions, and then they're playing the card. It might open with a soft action, then a fighter action, and then maybe a brigade maneuver. And what we saw in this last round, we had a couple players that opened with the division operation where they're moving 3 of their brigades at once and doing a major ground campaign as their opening move. So it's interesting. A lot of different opening options. There's a lot of...
But there's nothing within the game itself or the game mechanics that it advantages one side over the other.
That's correct.
Really starting
it is about as even as you can possibly make it, to where it really is based on their decisions and on the roll of the die. Because you can have the best decisions, and if you roll terribly, then it's not your day in Vegas.
The story,
right?
That's the story of my risk life.
Yeah. So bottom line, that was the mystery game. And I was calling it a mystery because I did have several options of pathways I could go, and then this ended up, from a development standpoint, being mature enough to be able to play. And then I also wanted to make sure that the players entering this, none of them knew coming into it what this game was. And then, so our first event, we spent 2 hours doing a tutorial, letting each team play the game, so that the first time for competition was not learning how to play the game. Because anytime you play a game for the first time, you're just learning the game, right? And so we did a tutorial. Would have loved to have actually had more time to give them tutorial time. But in the end, the first day in the morning, we did tutorial on the game, and then the first competition kicked off at 1300 that day. So that was the board game event. And what we saw out of the first round, so first off, from the player standpoint, we divided them into groups, and then they went through each round as a group. So we had 2 players from each team competing as a 4-person group. So, for example, 2 from EWS, 2 from McTog, and then they would play like Joint Tactics Arena, and then the next round they would go, and that same 4 players would compete against each other in Company Commander Modern, and then the third round they would go in Flashpoint campaigns and compete against each other in Flashpoint campaigns. And we had 3 of these groups in a round robin going through this. What we saw coming out of the first round, McTog was in first place, followed by Expeditionary Warfare School, followed by AATV East. And then in the second round, EWS gained the lead and started to break out, and by about 150 points, and then followed by McTog, and then followed by AITB. And then this last third round that we just did, EWS gained further in their lead, about 1,300 points, and then McTog at about 1,000, and AITB was around 850 behind them. So McTog and EWS are going to advance into the finals now. And tomorrow morning, it's a 0-0 score. So The first 3 rounds was just to determine the top 2 teams that would advance. EWS definitely demonstrated that they're the team to beat right now. So I would say the underdog going into the finals tomorrow is McTogg.
But it's 0-0, though.
It is 0-0, and it's anybody's game. And which, by the way, the McTogg guys had the highest scores in Flashpoint campaigns. And then EWS had the highest scores in Company Commander Modern and in Joint Tactics Arena. So EWS has the advantage here. But here's the other interesting thing about this is the team composition of players. So EWS has a major that is from the faculty and has 3 captains. One of those captains is an Army captain. So get this, the McTogg team is a staff sergeant, 2 sergeants, and a corporal.
Oh,
shit. Damn.
Tight.
Yes. So
Okay, I know who I'm rooting for.
yeah. So they, which by the way, they beat out some of their officers in the preliminaries because McTogg had, I think it was about 8 players competing to get this, and then they've necked down to these 4 enlisted, and they fought their way here, and now they fought their way to second place to be in the finals. So yeah, the McTogg team, a bit of underdogs here.
It truly is an underdog story.
And it's pretty exciting. So we have 4 officers versus 4 enlisted in the finals with EWS versus McTogg. So I couldn't, you couldn't script it better than this right now. It's
really.
it's an interesting tournament.
That's awesome. So based on from like a learning standpoint, as an observer, how have the fights generally been going? Have you seen, or have victories because one side uses maneuvers, tactics better, is able to cause systematic collapse, or has that been pretty attritional, as in both sides are pretty easily matched, and it's just who's able to brawl it out? Like how has the character of the fighting been so far?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's different. Really, the 3 games all have kind of some different characteristics, and I think the one that I think from a tactics standpoint right now that I think is the most interesting, where we're immediately seeing some differences in the decision-making, the tactics, is the company tactics game. And the scenario is one where you're in the Baltic states, the Russians are attacking, and you have, if on the blue side, you have a Marine mechanized company with ACVs, you got some LAVs, you got your organic precision fires, loading munitions, you got some javelins, and your mission is to be in the defense and not let the Russians get off the board behind you, right? And then the Russians, you have a tank-heavy armored force with some mechanized companies also. So you have a lot of direct firepower, and you've got armor and you've got mobility, and you're basically trying to break through this Marine defense. So what we've been seeing, and some very different outcomes between some of the different games, because we've seen some good tactical decision making, we've seen some not so great tactical decision making, and what's interesting about Marines tend to be very aggressive. Imagine that, and even in the defense, being very offensively minded, and probably sometimes to a fault. And so what we've seen in some of these matches is on the U.S. side with that Marine company, if they're playing their defense too far forward, and if they are trying to maneuver into key terrain that they can't position on at the beginning of the game, but they're like, hey, I want to move forward and get on that terrain, then they get caught maneuvering and not in an established defense, right? Or they get caught out in the open, and when the U.S. player has been trying to position themselves too far forward in this defense, they've been getting crushed, because when you have a bunch of tanks with 125 millimeter guns coming at you, and you're trying to maneuver with an an ACV, an amphibious combat vehicle, that's not a good equation. And then the other thing is the decision to dismount. So when you're running around that battlefield with an ACV with a squad in the back, and then when that gets killed, you're losing from a point standpoint in the game, the point value of the ACV plus the squad, and it's taken out in one hit, right? Which obviously from a tactics standpoint, in the real world, you don't want to be in that position and making that decision of, when do you dismount the squad? Where do you want to be on the battlefield with that mechanized formation, and where do you dismount your squad, and then where do you put your amphibious combat vehicle? Those are real world decisions. Yep. And what we're seeing in the game is the players are maneuvering and not dismounting when they should be dismounting and getting their unit in a position to defend. The other interesting thing is from loitering munitions standpoint. So in the game, you have your organic precision fires, and each turn you can launch one of those loitering munitions and put it in the air. And we've got the Hero 120 drone that they're putting up in the game. So you can put one up. And what the players tend to do is they'll put one up and then they'll use it to strike immediately, right? And what happens then is when you're employing those one at a time, the defender's air defense capabilities can concentrate to engage that one, right? And so you're piecemeal employing your loitering munitions. What we're not seeing, and that they have the opportunity to do, is to put their loitering munitions up in the air each turn, but save it and start to build a swarm, right? So then you're holding it, and then you can throw it out there and mass on an opponent, where now when they engage with their air defenses, they expend it, and they might shoot down the first one or two, but in that same turn, you're hitting them with a bunch of them, and something's going to get through, right? So those are just really interesting tactical decisions that are very relevant to fighting company-level operations. When do you dismount? When do you put your drones up? When do you employ those drones, and in how many at a time? I mean, those are great decisions that the game is allowing the players to make those decisions. And what we're seeing is the players that make sound tactical decisions. And hey, you're in the defense. Fight a defensive action and be patient and willing to put your forces in hide positions or, reverse slope defense and wait for the enemy to come to you.
Exactly.
But what tends to happen is Marines tend to be very impatient and they want to be aggressive and attack. And so we're seeing some of these heavy losses where, like, the American side ends up getting a lot of their forces beat up in that scenario is because of that kind of tactical decision making.
Because you could be offensive on the defense, but you have to maybe wait for them to come first and then do a counter attack.
It's that tactical patience. Yes.
So you are you seeing that, like, a lot of people are planning more for the short term rather than the long term, just based off what I've heard about loitering munitions, and they're viewing the problem as like a current feature rather than like considering what's going to happen a few turns down.
Yeah, and this can be a tendency with gameplay decisions, is sometimes you can just be very reactive in making your decisions, where you look at what you see on the screen, your force is what it is, and you make a snap decision based on your snap assessment of what you're seeing on the screen, right? And I don't want to stereotype, the player pool we had, because they were all fantastic. Very competitive group. They were all intense. Love the competition that we had. And so any of my critiques, I'm not disparaging the tactical decisions of the group. Everybody,
this is how we learn.
That's right.
Exactly.
We play these games to learn, and I commend them all for being willing to take that step to compete.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And so, but that's going through, and when you're playing a game, quite often you fall into a mental trap of and I do it when I sit down and play a game, and you make snap decisions, and like you see what's on the board and you make the call based on what you see. If you don't pause and come up with a plan of what is your theory of victory here, right? What is your concept for what is your mission? How are you going to accomplish that? Devising a plan, an approach, a concept of operation, and then sticking to it and not being distracted by the shiny object that, hey, all of a sudden you see a tank and you want to kill it, right? Okay, but what is your plan? And do you want to wait for that to get into an engagement area, and you want to then mass on it in an engagement area? So what tends to happen quite often is you want to kill as soon as you see an enemy vehicle or asset and you have an opportunity to engage it, is you make a snapping decision to engage it. That may or may not be the right decision. And under some circumstances, it might be, right? You may have a window of opportunity. And that's the great thing about gaming is quite often there is no textbook answer of exactly, no, you should have done this. But then there are obviously better decisions and there are poorer decisions that you could make. So,
well, awesome. Well, looking forward to see. So for those who might be listening and tuning in tomorrow, what time is are is the final battles, and when's the Commandant's Cup going to be declared?
So we are going to kick off at 0900 tomorrow morning. We're going to do a staggered start, actually, because what we didn't want to do is start all 3 events at once, have them all end at once, and just be kind of a surprise. What we wanted to do is set up a little bit of drama here and do a staggered start and a staggered finish. So we're going to start the first game at 0900, which is going to be our board game Joint Tactics Arena. And then our next game will kick off 30 minutes later, which will be Company Commander Modern at 0930. And then at 1000, we will begin the Flashpoint Campaigns event. And then each of those is going to run 3 hours. So at about 1200, we'll get the results from the first match, and we'll post that on the leaderboard. And then 30 minutes later, we'll get the results from the next one. And so we'll start to build a little tension here to see who's out in front and change the scoreboard. So the first results will be right around noon, with then the final results of the final match at 1300. And
Beautiful.
then we're gonna do the trophy presentation at 1415.
All right, well, Tim, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate having you. This wargame tournament is the most badass shit I've ever seen since I've joined the Marine Corps Association, and we're looking forward to see how it concludes. So,
2 shall enter, 1 shall leave.
Yeah, I love it.
all right, have a good one, y'all.
This episode is brought to you by the Marine Corps Association and Modern Day Marine, calling all Marines and their families. Gear up for the Modern Day Marine Expo at the Walter E. Washington Convention Center, going April 30th to May 2nd. Uncover the latest military innovations, and don't miss the exclusive Military Spouse Summit. Hear firsthand from leaders about policies impacting and supporting Marine Corps families. It's your chance to be informed and connected. Secure your spot today. Visit MarineMilitaryExpos.com for more details and to register. That's MarineMilitaryExpos.com. Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices and contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Litchman, William Trudy, and our guests. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.